Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast, coming to you live from massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Right now, just me tonight. Aaron is off traveling in Colorado and most likely will not be able to join us. It's doing that Colorado thing that he does. But anyways, today's going to be an interesting show. We've followed a lot of trends over the last couple of years, and the one that comes up all the time, especially for operators, for people that are on the vendor side, people that are on the doer side of things, the customer side of things, is they're seeing more and more this idea that software is eating the world, right? This idea that more and more things are becoming enabled via software, whether those are new technologies, whether they're business models, whether they're trying to take physical goods and embedding software within them. And so, we thought tonight would be kind of cool. We're going to have an opportunity to speak with some folks that are living and breathing this stuff every day and have a very good sense of what's going on in this world. So excited to have Matt Colyer, product manager from GitHub, on tonight. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So give us a little bit of your background, because not only are you part of GitHub doing product management at GitHub, but you've also been a developer, you've been an entrepreneur prior to GitHub. So give folks a sense of your background, not only what you're working on today, but some of the things that you've been working on in the past as well.
Sure, yeah. My career has definitely progressed from being engineer to product management where I'm at now. And it's taken place mostly at smaller high-tech companies out here in San Francisco. I think I've worked at 6 different startups. 2 of which I've co-founded, the most recent of which was called Easel. It was a Y Combinator-backed startup, and we actually got acquired in November 2012 by GitHub. And so that's why I'm here at GitHub today. And during that transition, initially when I came to GitHub, I started as an engineer. I worked a little bit on the Atom project before it was public, and then transitioned over to the enterprise product since then, and then I've been working on that since then. And now I take more of a general business focus. So still looking after enterprise, but also our organization product as well.
Okay, great. And, it's sort of weird, when GitHub first got started, it was, this sort of super exciting thing, not that it's not exciting anymore, but it was a super exciting idea that people were going to, put their software out in this public place, which, open source has been around for a long time, but it was kind of this very, broad realization that was a trend that was happening. And nowadays, GitHub is such an integral part of, people's business, people's development process. I mean, you'll hear from time to time, like, GitHub is almost like DNS for developers. Like, it just absolutely has to be there. We know Marc Andreessen made this sort of famous "software's eating the world" quote a little while ago. We're seeing more and more companies, though, not just sort of vendor-led companies, but more and more companies of every ilk, making software development a core part of their core business, sort of insourcing again the idea of where software and that comes from. Give us a sense from your perspective. What are you seeing in that? Is that a trend that's realistic? And what are you seeing in that space? How are you seeing customers really starting to re-embrace that idea of owning and building software and making it part of their business?
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time to be in software. Even in my short tenure here working on the enterprise product, I've definitely noticed that every company is becoming a software company. I think some of the trends that you've kind of pointed out have been really critical. I think oftentimes companies in, like, I'd say the late 90s and the early 2000s, they felt like this is something that they could outsource, and offshoring was a big thing. And I think probably, the last 5 years, it's kind of turned the other way. Especially with the advent of mobile devices, I would say is like a large motivator. Like a lot of these like retail operations, other like large manufacturers have realized that like these mobile devices are very personal to every single one of their consumers.
Right.
And so owning that experience is incredibly important because it allows them to have a deeper interaction with their customers. And if they use an outsourced company, like they just can't instill their company values in the same way that they can if they own that development themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. We're seeing, everybody, they've got to have their app. But it's not just, I want to have my app. It's, I want to have more direct access to, what people do, not just how they buy, but the context that they buy, how do they interact around all those things? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes people underestimate how much mobile is really changing, how much people interact with businesses, how quickly they can get information and how important that is. What do you, I mean, like, what do you hear from people, companies, ISVs and so forth, as they're sort of making that transition? Are there sort of moments, aha moments that you hear from them where they go, oh, wow, we did this and the business kind of totally changed for us, or, we had no idea how big this, this sort of community or what was available to us. Do you have any good anecdotes from sort of, kind of that aha moment for people of sort of getting back to insourcing?
I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I know I've been struck by some of the customers that I've interacted with, of people like brand names that you and I would know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I can't use their names.
Yeah, that's fine.
That permission, but I was just struck at some of like these large manufacturing firms at like how deep that knowledge is. Like honestly, like going to their offices and visiting them and hearing the stories that they tell, like you would think that they're just like another high tech firm starting up, and really instilling that understanding of user experience, I think, is also kind of new. So it's not just the development. Like the thing that's really changed is like that they become customer first companies. Previously, it was like the company would kind of just develop a product and put it out there in the market, and then hopefully they would sell it and it would work. And I think in the last couple of years, it's really become clear that the companies that are most successful are the ones that truly empathize with their customers, and really take that design and user experience to the next level.
Yeah, and I think those examples, and again, the company name almost becomes sort of irrelevant, right? You could be talking about an automotive manufacturer, you could be talking about a tractor manufacturer, you could be talking about people that build almost anything. It's what I see is the internet, did some very interesting things in terms of how you could reach the marketplace, but then, it also disrupted how you knew the marketplace. And I think people are now getting smarter again about, like you said, when it becomes mobile or you're able to sort of have that personal interaction with somebody, what you can do with that experience and how you can customize it and how you can take feedback from them and update things in a pretty, real time experience and kind of give them what they're looking for, which you really couldn't necessarily do in the past. It was whatever your retail store could do, or it was, whatever was coming off the assembly line. So, it's always interesting to hear the stories that aren't just, the new social media app out of Silicon Valley. It's, what's going on in the rest of the world, which I think you're sort of highlighting.
Yeah, I think one really great example of that, actually, as you've been talking more, I've been thinking about it, is like the paint store, right? So like I remember when my parents went to go paint a room, like we went to the hardware store, picked up some like the paint sticks or whatever, and like with the paint chips on it, and we'd go home and try to like this tiny little square, trying to figure out well, does this color match or does that color match? And like the stuff that you see now in some of these apps is kind of incredible. It's like a mix of augmented reality and like a mobile like first experience, in that you just download this app on your phone and then you could sit in your room and take a picture of it and then play with these different colors. And then you can order the paint and then go to the store, pick it up, and like you're done.
Right.
And like that's like a huge amount of change, right? Like it enables these companies to reach consumers in a better way. Yeah.
No, there's you brought that up. There's a great example of that. I think it was Sherwin-Williams at the last DevOps Enterprise Summit, and the guy who was giving the talk, it was just a side talk. He said, we're a 150-year-old company. We do paint, and none of you would think that paint is technology oriented. And then he went and gave that example, exactly what you said, which is, we help you reimagine what your world looks like and what your dining experience or your living room experience looks like. And that's, he was like, that's really cool from a paint company. The other big trend, not just owning software, getting back into insourcing, but we're seeing more and more companies who are realizing that being part of open source software and being part of communities is really important. I mean, there are the sort of cornerstone ones that people know about, the Netflixes of the world and Netflix OSS, but we're seeing companies like Capital One, and we're seeing General Electric, and we're seeing big household names that you never would have thought would have gotten into open source, are not only actively participating, but they're creating their own projects. Does that surprise you at all, or anything from that space that you're sort of learning, especially on the enterprise side of things, that surprised you, or that you're seeing as interesting trends?
It's super fascinating to me. Actually, before I got really into startups, I was actually super passionate about open source. So I probably committed to my first open source project when I was like 12. So a while ago. And like, I remember at the time being so enthralled by like the idea of like the possibilities it could unlock, the fact that you could work with somebody halfway across the world on the same idea and like turn it into reality, was a super exciting thing for me. And so I think being in a really unique position and time and place, being at GitHub is like, it's awesome that we can start to kind of be a part of that story of like enabling these companies to take the learnings of the open source world and enable them to change their development processes to create better product. And I fundamentally believe it's like a better way to develop software.
Yeah.
And I think it's also tackling a lot of these challenges that companies have had for a long time. Like companies have been multinational, geo-distributed for a very long time. And open source provides some tooling and some processes to kind of like circumvent that, that allows them to take more efficient use of that, like the position of their employees where they are when they can work.
Right. Well, and you used to always hear, big CEOs who would say, hey, we've got to be innovative and, not all the great ideas are going to come from us. And then, it was a great sort of stump speech, but then it kind of went away. And, what's really interesting to me about GitHub, amongst a lot of other things, is it's not only the place where you keep your software, it integrates with things so you can do CI and CD, but there's so much collaboration that goes on. I mean, it's as much a collaboration platform as it is anything to do with software development. And because it's open and because anybody can collaborate, anybody can push code, anybody can make a pull request, but then you can just have open discussions around the platform. I think that's, putting the tools with the idea is really, really, really powerful and makes that thing that you were talking about happen. It allows, different companies, different regions of the world to integrate with each other. And to me, that part is really, really powerful. And it's not something you would have naturally expected to just sort of happen. What do you, when you see people doing those types of collaborations, do you find as you're talking to enterprise companies, what are the sort of first steps and best practices and things that you sort of recommend to them to say, hey, it's, like the equivalent of like, come on in, the water's warm, or, just dip your toes in and it's okay. Here's an example of some things that have worked out and you haven't, sunk the company because somehow you gave away intellectual property or something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about insourcing is that it actually doesn't require that many hurdles to be crossed by companies. So they actually don't have to worry about intellectual property concerns because insourcing is all about creating that open source community within your company.
Yeah.
And so that code is just as protected as it was before. And it allows you to leverage those processes that have been developed by the open source community and apply them internally. So things like code review, collaboration, transparency, are all important things that we've seen successfully transition into the enterprise. And I think one of the very first steps, honestly, is like a lot of these companies getting onto a single platform is a huge first step. That oftentimes when we come into these accounts, they'll have like 5 or 6 different version control systems. And when they switch to GitHub, they unify on a single appliance. And that in itself unlocks a huge amount of value because now a developer can search across all of the code within that company. And so an example of this is like maybe you work at a car manufacturer and you have a VIN decoder. So like the VIN is like that unique serial number.
Right.
And so like it's a very common operation that they could apply maybe in their website and maybe in their mobile app. And like previous to now, maybe their mobile developers were on a single version control system over here, and then their website developers were on a different version control system. But now on GitHub, they're on a single instance. And so the next time a developer needs to use this VIN decoder library, they go on to their GitHub Enterprise instance and search for it. And they're able to find that, hey, look, somebody already wrote this, right? And so now they don't have to rebuild that from scratch. And maybe they've made an improvement. They're like, actually, I need this functionality. And so they can contribute it back. And now those other products get to leverage that improvement as well.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. I think sometimes people forget that, GitHub isn't just for public projects. People can do private projects. It's a great way, like you said, to figure out, how to search across, an enterprise domain. Are we using, has this work already been done before? Has somebody already, worked on it? Or just, I want to see the conversation that went on around what happened with that piece of technology. Maybe we can reuse it. Maybe the scenario was a year or two ago and things have radically changed. And so that's really, really important. Like one of the things that a lot of companies are going through this transition. So people see the benefits of things like public cloud, GitHub as a public service. But, for whatever reason, they go, well, I can't use that service. I need my data to be on premises, or I need it to be secure in some different manner. I need my own system for whatever reason. What do you guys, because GitHub now has, there's not only, github.com, the public service, but there's GitHub Enterprise and GitHub for Business. And how do you see people managing the benefits and challenges of the thing that's run by somebody else versus sort of the same software that they can acquire for themselves and kind of operate them, on their own?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the customer. I mean, we offer both delivery models for our products because we think that there's just different markets with different needs. Right. So GitHub.com is honestly the product that people are probably most familiar with. And that's a hosted SaaS offering. And a lot of companies that are smaller or just they don't have as many IP concerns are comfortable with using the GitHub.com platform as it is today. Right. And that's great. I mean, the benefits are that we roll out changes multiple times a day on that platform. It's tested by millions of people, and you don't have to spend administrative effort to kind of get that best of breed delivery model there. Now, on the other hand, there are enterprises that need to have more security and more control over their code. And they need tighter audit controls or tighter audit, more detailed audit information about it. And so GitHub Enterprise is really the product that's built for them. And then oftentimes those companies still have their open source work on github.com, and they push it up from their GitHub Enterprise install when it's ready. Yeah.
And how is GitHub Enterprise sort of evolved? Is it, let's say I take an organization that to a certain extent is kind of segmented for whatever reason. It could be, sort of the General Electric model where I have different businesses that are just under the same umbrella, or, maybe I'm an organization that has to, have certain, like you said, security or audit reasons to be kind of separated. Are there ways to federate sort of GitHub Enterprise appliances at some point? If you say, hey, we started this way but we want to start connecting them together because, we've grown or evolved or something, or do they still, sort of operate under a single domain?
Well, we actually, our recommendation is actually to have a single appliance, even for these very large customers. Kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? That the larger the group of code that you have to work with, the more value you're going to unlock within your company, because even across multiple different business units, you might be able to find libraries, like maybe there's an image processing library that's useful in your like biomedical division, but that's also useful in maybe your mechanical division as well. And so we really do encourage companies, like oftentimes it's kind of a progression that they're very like used to a model where everything's siloed. And so even getting everything in a single system is like kind of a tough sell. But we provide the access controls to really lock it down to just the organizations. But we encourage those companies to slowly transition, like maybe just new projects. By default, so you open them up public within your company. And then they start to see the value of that. And then projects that were private previously are then turn public. And then it continues to unlock value for that company. And so like I would say that that's really the progression that we see. We really do have customers that have multiple instances. And we do provide a path and tooling to allow them to combine those instances into a single instance. So even if they do go down that road of like there's a single enterprise instance for each division, they can still make a choice in the future that rolls it all up into a single instance.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. What are you seeing just trend wise? Like you said, the companies in the Valley, they grow up around using GitHub as their way of building code and collaborating, or smaller companies will do that, GitHub.com. What do you see for, some of those faster moving smaller companies, just kind of best practices that large companies, should know more about, should be following, maybe don't follow, as much, that they could sort of easily adopt and become, better at developing software, better at being organized and so forth?
I think the most recent change in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, that the smaller companies have totally embraced is the continuous deployment model. It's like a huge shift from waterfall down to this always pushing features out when they're ready. And I think it does a couple different things that makes software development easier. First of all, it breaks huge problems down into very small ones, which reduces the complexity of the problem and then has a greater chance of ensuring your success. But then also, I think there's other parts of the tooling that really empower developers to focus where their time is best spent. So having, your deployment tools just be a push button that you can essentially deploy your application, your mobile app, your web app with a single command, reduces the pain and the friction. Like previously, like there was large like QA departments and build managers to kind of deploy things, and like automating that as much as possible. I mean, this is part of the DevOps movement, has like really unlocked a lot of value, and then people can focus on delivering value to their customers and less about the packaging and the delivery method.
Right. Yeah, I see that more and more. People, and sometimes it depends a little bit on who's talking and what sort of tools and services they're kind of involved with. But the ones that I see that are sort of successful, I mean, there'll be some early lighthouse people within an organization that might build a cool new application that kind of prove out agile or DevOps or whatever they're calling it, sort of going faster. But the thing that kind of I see tends to sort of make or break whether or not those things work is if they get those CI/CD pipelines in place and they get them right, as opposed to doing that sort of as an afterthought or doing that later and focusing more just on the development tools. And do you find that as well? You kind of, have to have the pipeline ready to go, whether you've got one project or 50 projects, as opposed to thinking about that later on once a whole bunch of new projects are in place?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is this big shift between the projects that were started with a CD pipeline in place versus the ones that weren't. And I think that's the biggest challenge for like large existing enterprises, is that they have a lot of projects that were started before the DevOps tooling was really developed.
Right.
And so like the advantages that these smaller companies have is that they don't have all this legacy code that they've got to maintain. And so I think enterprises have really caught on to this. And so all new projects are essentially following this methodology. But I think it's slower to come to these existing projects. Right. So it's going to take some time to kind of work through the rest of the ecosystem.
Yeah. I guess last question, and we'll sort of wrap it up here. You talked a little bit about, we're seeing mobile being such a big shift for people, companies in terms of how they interact with customers. And are you seeing anything in terms of, the shift from, web-centric apps to mobile apps and now maybe into different types of apps? People talk about serverless or IoT or other kind of interactions. Are you seeing different kind of requests to GitHub about, how they want the tooling to work, or, is the platform flexible enough to go, hey, whether you're doing web apps, whether you're doing mobile apps, whether you're doing whatever's coming next that might move even faster, is it kind of suited to deal with all that? Or are you seeing some new types of requests for things with these new types of applications being built?
So one of our important product strategies is actually, we believe integrations are incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be the platform that enables all of these different kinds of integrations. Like we realize the CI/CD pipeline for a mobile app is going to be completely different than for a Python web app. Mm-hmm. And we want developers from both kinds of applications to work on GitHub, the platform. And so that's where we really see like our partners in the ecosystem to be incredibly valuable, is that we're not going to be able to develop all these new and different tools. And it really fosters this environment of creativity, right? That like somebody on their weekend can kind of come up with a new programming language or new framework, try it out, plug it into our API, and then continue to use it with the rest of their tooling. So I do see a ton of innovation. If anything, I think the rate of change has increased. I think is probably the thing that's changed for me. Yeah. But there's no like bigger theme. Like I think there's just so much creativity. There's more developers now than there ever have been, and like we really see that trend accelerating. Right. And are excited about it because it unlocks all this human creativity. The more developers that we can get developing code. Yeah,
no, it's an incredibly exciting space to be. I mean, you think about the prospect of being like, well, I can save my IT department 15 or 20% is nice, and people pound away and they do those things. But the idea of kind of reshaping a business, reshaping what the top line of a company looks like, how they interact with their company, with their partners, with their customers, like. That'll get you up every single morning and go, how can I be creative? How can I listen to, look at the data in new ways? How can I listen to my customer? Like that's really exciting. And the fact that you guys are right in the middle of that has got to be, incredibly fun to just sort of get up every morning, go to work and figure out how to help them be successful.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me up in the morning is actually like expanding the definition of a developer. Like we've been thinking a lot about this recently. And today people often think of developers as people that come from traditional CS backgrounds. But I think more and more as these hack universities have gotten started, and there's more and more free content online that like people are coming from all sorts of backgrounds. People are making career transitions halfway through their career. Other people are starting out very young. And like, that's the thing that excites me is like, it's a great equalizer. Like when we distribute this skill set to a wider range of people, like we're unlocking both creativity and we're enabling those people to have like a great career. Yeah.
No, I think that's great sort of insight. I think, yeah, if you think about it, if this premise that sort of software is eating the world does sort of pan itself out, and you want to be in building, whatever discipline you want to be in, software will just be part of that. Just like, every other change has been part of it. So, having some knowledge of that, whether you're actually writing code or you're just thinking about customer experiences, or you're just, you're involved with what it means to, having a mobile device in your hand could do to change the business is pretty interesting. And people need to be thinking about that. Very cool. Listen, I'm going to wrap it up. What's the best way if people want to, learn more about what you're doing, sort of on the enterprise side of GitHub, want to reach out to you on Twitter or anywhere else? What's the best way to kind of get in touch with you or the kind of the work that you're working on at GitHub?
Yeah, I have a personal Twitter. It's M Colyer, Colyer. But to find out about the company's work, our blog often has like our feature announcements. That's where it goes out first. So that's a great place to follow. And then if you're more interested in the enterprise side of things, it's github.com/business. And we've got details of the various business products that we offer. Fantastic. And will you guys be out and about at events and different things coming up soon? Oh, yeah, we have a ton of events. I believe we also post those on our blog as well. Okay, cool. So we'll put those in the show notes and kind of highlight that for people. And folks, if you're going to be at like Velocity Conference here in a week or so, the GitHub folks are always there. They're typically doing tutorials and things, everything from, how to get started to how to do pretty advanced stuff. So definitely go take a look, check them out. As always, you can get discounts. If you use PC Cloud 20, you'll get 30% off for Velocity Conf, and we're still running the contest for a few more days to give away some free passes. So definitely a chance to meet up with the folks from GitHub. Always very, very nice, great set of training on their website. So go take a look. Matt, thank you so much for being on tonight. We really appreciate it. And for Matt and for Aaron, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.